Anita, why does the truest thing about you tend to be the hardest thing to explain?
This is an interesting and difficult question, and uh, I know you're asking not just me, because I imagine there's some pretty true things that are very difficult to explain about myself as a human. But for everybody, like, I think there is this challenge that the things that we feel and the things that we sense, um, sometimes there just isn't language for the thing.
You're listening to Mind Love with me, Melissa Monti.
It doesn't exist yet, or like language is too limiting, like it maybe taps at like a corner of something, but it can't comprehend the whole. And then sometimes we can't even see the whole, right? Like if we're trying to understand something about ourselves, there's not like always a mirror that we can stand in front of and see the entirety of ourselves or our capability. And it's always like we're kind of standing at an angle somehow, looking at a mirror, seeing parts of something, but not seeing the whole thing. So, I mean, that's just like the beginning of why I think it's hard.
Oh, yeah, there's so many phrases for this. There's the you can't read the label from inside the bottle. There's the story of the elephant, and it's like, oh, what is this? It's a long, skinny hose, and that's the trunk. And it's like, no, step back, it's an elephant. There's even the studies that I've talked about countless times on this show around how people with a larger vocabulary actually have a broader range of emotions because they won't just default to what they know, or even how people find almost freedom in understanding that there's a word in Japanese that we don't have here. And it's like, well, does that mean we're not experiencing it in that way? And so when we're in our limited purview, behind these eyes, not necessarily seeing our patterns, but identifying with them, which I just had almost an aha moment. It's like, are you standing objectively and trying to describe, or are you realizing through that description, because you're talking about me, you have to identify with it. So you're more hesitant, you're more blinded by those things that you've always carried. It's a big topic. It's kind of coming at us from all angles. But I know that such a big part of what you do is helping people to find that. So where do you start?
I think a lot of folks who work in creative professions, especially with writing, language, all that sort of stuff, like folks try to start with words. I don't I try to find energy. I'm like chasing goosebumps. I'm chasing like where someone is feeling called, even if it feels like the wrong thing, if that makes sense. Like, even if it feels like it's not the thing they're supposed to do. I'm using my air quotes here. Like, there's all this stuff that I think we're supposed to do. Like, we're supposed to talk about ourselves in a particular way, use a certain kind of bio, have like the right credentials, the right authority, all the evidence, all that sort of stuff. And all that stuff, yes, that's important, but it's so far down the line from the beginning. And the beginning is really, it's this palpable charge that's accumulating inside you somewhere. You can liken it to a storm cloud, where like there's bursts of things happening in there, but it's not lightning yet. It hasn't found a path. It's just there, and it's sort of like a static charge where you get close to it, and you've got like laundry that's like got the static charge, and it makes like hair on your arm stand up a little bit, but it's not like, whoa, full body electric shock of any kind. It's that, like, chasing where that accumulates inside of you, and like poking and prodding to see like, no, actually, is there greater charge that can be found here? And because I'm kind of fascinated with all of this, I started actually looking into physics of lightning. And there's something called potential difference, which is what voltage is. And it's about like, what is the potential difference between basically A and B? And the higher the potential difference, the greater the charge. So, for example, like if the current reality of something is A, but the reality that you can imagine that hasn't been articulated yet is B, and that B is further away from A. This is very abstract, I know, but like the greater the potential difference is, the stronger that charge is. And you can liken it to like, oh, that's a 9-volt battery idea, right? It's not huge, right? There's some energy there. It's useful, would power a toy, maybe a vibrator if we're going there. But
We're going there.
but like if you start to find, okay, like here's an idea that might be able to power a house, the greater difference between where we're at right now and where this idea could take us, like, okay, house level power, right? Then you've got like city level power, right? And that can change like an industry, that could change the trajectory of where we're at currently. And then you got like lightning strike ideas that like irreversibly change everything. And so you're kind of chasing the charge and trying to find the electric live wire that's inside somebody. And they feel it too when they find it.
That reminds me of there's a book that's like 10x is better than 2x or something like that. And it's talking about something different, but the way my brain works is something from one field, all of a sudden I'm like, wait, the way this applies to this other field is is my lightning strike idea. But so often because we are comfortable with the familiar, that we don't even realize we're only letting our minds go to just a little bit beyond that. Like, okay, it's kind of scary, but it's not going to break me. Whereas this book I read is talking about business, where it's just like, no, like if it's only 2x, like go for the 10x idea, see what happens. And that's often what happens with people that have done it before. They have more confidence, or people that have nothing to lose, where it's like, nope, I got to bet it all on this one thing, because if I win by just betting 10%, it's not going to fix my problem. So let me bet it all. And I'm either going to crash and burn, or it's going to actually be the thing that changes my life. And so I wonder how much of it is of getting to that idea is actually learning to stretch your own comfort zone. When people are kind of in that 2x zone where it's like, okay, stop just mildly tickling yourself. How do you kind of poke them to expand further, to bring up more of that energy?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of different dimensions on which you can take like what might be like a tiny tickle level idea, the little 9-volt, you know, I don't know if you were like kid that licked batteries. I was.
We were 90s kids. Didn't everyone lick batteries back then?
It was like required to graduate from 5th grade to 6th grade, got to lick a battery. So, you know, moving from that level charge to something more significant, you have all these different dimensions you can play with. So one is like raise the stakes of the idea, right? Like if right now, yeah, cool, it kind of like changes something a little bit, that's awesome, but it's not going to like make somebody stop in their tracks and reimagine their world, right? Like, but what if the stakes were bigger, right? What if it mattered more, instead of it just being like a nice to have thing and be like, oh, this rearranges the world kind of thing. And not every idea requires that, but that's how you can start to play with making an idea have more charge. Another way is to expand the possibility, like the scope, the scale, the magnitude of the idea, who it applies to, when it applies, like all of that kind of stuff. And then another one is to play with the insight that's there, right? You might feel more comfortable with like a close and familiar scale of insight that you might have, familiar language or language that other people already use. Borrowing that, feeling like that lends you more authority or credibility because there's an established precedent for how to talk about a thing. Break that apart. Find new ways to new language, maybe language that's bolder, that has a stronger point of view, a stronger stance. These are all ways to play with the energy of that idea and see like, where does it want to go? Because I believe that these things have a life of their own. Like if I'm there and I'm helping somebody, I'm not providing lightning for them. I'm helping them find the charge that's alive inside them and where it wants to go. And it's more of a process of revelation than creation.
The thing that I'm always intrigued about is as I have grown in my business journey, people don't realize how many of those skills apply directly to your life as well. And as you were talking, I couldn't help but think how much of self development in general is like, no, but what actually makes you feel alive?
Yeah.
And so beyond just naming the thing, it's choosing the thing too. It's like, do you really like being a substitute teacher? Some people are like, yes, like I don't want to be tied down, but I can pop in when I want, really make a difference in a kid's life. And another person's like, well, it pays the bills. And if you learn to tune into that to actually feel it, which I think is a skill that most humans have lost or have forgotten within themselves and need to relearn, then what actually opens up to you? You're not only being guided to the language to talk about what you're doing, but you're being guided to what you're doing as well.
I love this because, as you know, last year I was working on a talk, sort of drafting a TEDx talk for myself. And the premise really was like, our voice isn't something that we find, it's something that we live. And that living where that electric charge is, where that charge wants to take us, where that aliveness is, that's where you start to find your voice and you start to, I don't want to use I just called my own, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's where you get to live your voice. It's alive through you. And a silly version of this that I practice is when I go to events or conferences, festivals, whatever, where there's no way I'm going to possibly experience everything that's there. And I don't really live with like a sense of FOMO, but I like to practice letting my feet take me where they want to go. And it sort of disconnects from like whatever governor aspect of my brain likes to be in charge and rationalize decisions, etc. I point my feet in whatever direction they feel called to go, and I follow them, and they will take me some surprising places. I'm like, really? You want to take me here? This tent out of all of them? Like, this doesn't look particularly interesting.
Porta Potty 3? What's in
Porta
here?
Potty 3. What is happening here?
A wallet.
A lottery ticket. Wow. And I experienced the most wild things that way, like meeting fascinating humans or being right there for an event I wouldn't even known existed. Or I walk right into this little tiny grove where like there is a deer and a bunny like basking in moonlight, right? Like these kind of magical experiences. And I think there are aspects of ourselves that are tapped into all of that, that know where the energy wants to pull us. That's not rational. It's not in the realm of language in our brain. It's pre-language. It's that energetic dimension of our lives that exists, that we are sort of attuned to, like tuning out, because it makes things simpler for existing as a human in this world.
Right. I'm reminded of something that just happened a couple days ago. I heard somebody say, I was eavesdropping at the coffee shop again, but I heard someone say, I'm done following my heart. I need to follow my brain this time. I'm assuming they were talking about a love interest, right?
Yeah.
And it was funny because this was actually one of my visceral moments where I it almost felt like I got punched in the gut. And I was like, I think you got it all wrong. And I get where people are coming from. It's like, oh, I made the stupid decision because I felt the lovey feelings. And I need to actually think about this more. But I think people are confused as to what following your heart actually is. It's like those lustful feelings or the intrigue you feel about a new connection, a new job opportunity, a new adventure isn't necessarily your heart every time. Like you have to learn to tune into your energy. I feel like people are just comparing or pitting against each other two parts of their brain and calling it heart versus mind. And it's like, no, you got to get out of both of those things. Get out of your nervous system patterns. I think that's what it more is that's what most people believe following their heart is, versus your mental overthinking about everything. what actually happens if you tune into your energy around it? What actually happens if you ask yourself questions and notice where you're stimulated and build the language with yourself before you just say, I know exactly how to follow this. If you haven't been tuning into that, it's going to be very difficult to feel, and you're probably going to confuse it with something else. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you're working with people around this, what kinds of questions do you ask to get them to kind of get beyond the mental familiarity or the things that they've already been churning through over and over again, believing that there's nothing else?
Yeah, I mean, there are very established neural pathways that we're accustomed to traveling at great speed. Um, I like to invite all three different dimensions, or at least the three different dimensions to the party, right? So there's the mind, right? And if you try to tell somebody that we're not going to use the mind and they're very used to using the mind, like they're going to panic, frankly. So you have to say, like, okay, the mind is involved, right? Discernment is involved. We're inviting that aspect, that dimension. We're naming it here, right? We're going to bring the heart here. So that gives you a moment, like a doorway. We're going to think heart in a heart way about the question, the project, the endeavor, the brand, the story, whatever it is. And then the gut, right? And bring the gut in as well. And there's sentience in the gut. I'm sure you have talked about this. There's tons of studies about this. It's fascinating, but it's all of these are different kind of energies. There are different wavelengths or whatever that these things are tapping into that are part of that energetic field in which you exist and in which your ideas exist, your story exists, your path for the future exists. And we're just more accustomed to traveling in a specific one. And if I'm working with somebody who I know is very accustomed to using that governing rational part of their mind, gut checking against what everybody else thinks that they should be doing, then I will lean more heavily in the doorways that they're not used to opening. And I'll be more of a guide for them there. But then I'll also introduce some practices where they can try to start tapping into this for themselves. So if they have a couple different directions that they could go in for, say, a talk or a business or whatever, I will invite them to literally write them on some sticky notes and put them on the floor at some great distance from each other and ask them which one their feet want to take them to.
Hmm.
And it's harder to ignore a somatic direction coming from your body. It is a stronger signal than if you're just sitting here static thinking about it and trying to think from your gut. I'm using air quotes again. Like, it's hard to do if you're not used to doing it, but you'll notice something. You're like, if your feet really want to walk to this other thing that's more unconventional, that's a stronger take, but a higher risk, there's less precedent for the thing. There's energy around it, but there's also all these nerves and anxiety and fear around it. But you notice there is something pulling you that way. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it, but there is information there that will help you make that decision when you do, invite the brain, the heart, the gut to the table, and you weigh all of these things together.
Do you have any examples of how somebody came to you with a description or what they were struggling with and what unlocked, even if it's something of your own?
Well, there's a client that I worked with on a TEDx talk, and she had a lifetime of experience working as an expert in finance, accounting, building businesses, that sort of thing. And she had done some advising along the way. She was also deeply immersed in sort of personal development and part of like the Tony Robbins world. So there was like a lot of quoting of other leaders, other experts, these visionaries in those fields. And it was clouding all of her own like wisdom and insight because she's so used to citing all of these other people. Um, and when I was working with her and trying to get at the core of what she has uniquely to offer the world, like where her original energy and thinking is, uh, we had to clear all of that kind of stuff out of the way. And she brings just her own personal energy into the room is this kind of very bubbly, joyful energy. And her wish is to help people make wiser financial decisions, to build better futures for themselves, all of that sort of stuff. And we're chasing that quality of her own energy and the desire for the impact of her work, chasing those threads led to this idea of joyful finance.
Mm.
And we're like, there was some like palpable, sparky energy around that. I could see it in her. Like she lit up. The writer I was working with lit up. I could feel it. Like even talking about it, I can feel it. And I'm like, okay, what is this? And, we start talking about the concept of joy and how do you get joy? Like, and are there false like paths to joy, or joy that's ephemeral in a way that's not nourishing, the same way that like, yeah, I might want mint chocolate chip ice cream sandwiches, but if I keep having them, I'm probably going to regret it. Like, and so that led us to this idea of joy on credit versus compounding joy, and using these like established forms of finance and ways in which we buy and spend and invest in the future or not. That led us to this kind of territory of intellectual property for her that she could build a talk around, that she's now building like a whole business around. But it's, you chase those energetic threads, you kind of smash concepts together and see what's unfolding, what that chemical reaction is. It already exists. It was existing in her, but there wasn't language around it yet. And once you have that language, then I could see the moment when you saw it, right? Like something happens. And now suddenly that idea can exist in someone else. They can carry it with them. They can apply it to themselves. And you don't even have to have like a big theory of what this concept is. Like you can start to imagine, I think I kind of get what joy on credit might be, right? I kind of get what compounding joy might be. And you've only taken something that exists already in the world that people are familiar with, but added a new layer of meaning onto it that changes it just enough to make you tilt your head a little bit and get curious and want to know more.
Sometimes the beautiful thing about leaving a little room for interpretation is that each individual is able to apply it in the way that they need it. So I thought of a couple of different things. First, my Amazon cart history, but second, then it started to trickle into other areas of my life. And I was reminded about the time that I was thinking about giving up drinking for a while before I finally did. But ironically, at the time, this was back in my Santa Monica days, my weed guy, he was this like 50-year-old, like wise man who dropped a lot of nuggets we still talk about today. He was just like, he said something about 30s is a great time to stop drinking. And then every time he'd come, he'd give some little anecdote about it. And one of them was how you're just borrowing energy from tomorrow. And I'm like, wait, that resonates with me, because at the time I was at the beginning of my human optimization journey. And I couldn't help but feel like a hypocrite every time that I did that, at least to the level that I was. I was drinking every night at that point. And so when I would grab a drink, I'd say, but I'm taking away from tomorrow. And it really helped me to cut back little by little until eventually I was like, I don't know if this is really in alignment anymore. And now I'll have like 1 or 2 a year. So that all of a sudden is applying to me in a whole different area of finance in a way that's visceral to me, that I can then apply in the way that she is encouraging me to apply it.
Yeah. I mean, and even the language you're using, right? Like resonant and visceral, right? These are sensations. Like you can feel resonance. There is a literal vibration. And this sort of visceral is like the viscera of the body is like this inner, like kind of gore, essentially, that is connected to like our embodiment, being incarnate in flesh as a human. And it sounds kind of gross when you talk about it that way, but there's reasons we borrow language like that when we talk about these things, because it's about feeling. And something you said earlier around like, finding like this sense of awe and relief when you discover there's a word in Japanese that we don't have in this language, but that perfectly sums up the feeling or idea that you've been struggling to convey. And do these things exist before language, or can we conceive or behave in the same way if we don't have language for them? I think we behave totally differently. And there's some evidence for this. I don't know if you've read Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass.
No, it's on my list though, but now it's
There
moved up.
is a beautiful section in the book where she talks about learning her ancestral language. And my memory is terrible and I don't remember what language that is. But the language has almost the inverse relationship of nouns and verbs that English does. In English, we've got 70% nouns and 30% verbs, roughly. Don't quote me. Don't hold me to account. But that means that 70% of the way we interact with the world, we interact with it as objects and things. And the inverse is true in this ancestral language where 70% are verbs and 30% are nouns. That means a tree is not a thing. A tree is treeing. It is a verb. It is and when you see a tree that way, when it's not an object but a being that is alive and doing what trees do, you can't treat it the same way. There is an embodied resonance and reverence for. I can't even for it, and even English is insufficient in trying to address and name it, the tree itself. You can't just chop it down and commodify it in the same way when you see it as something that is as alive as you are. And language shapes our behavior and perception totally. There are languages where when the future tense doesn't exist as a separate form of speech from present tense, they save better for the future because it's not some distant thing. It's part of today. We don't do a great job with that in the English language because we see it as a someday, one day when I get around to retiring, or one day when I get around to doing the thing that I should be doing every day, like strength training or whatever it is. We just put it off because our language makes it easier to see it as something separate.
This is interesting too, because I once remember reading about what was lost when we actually developed the written word.
Mm.
And people talk about how, because we're writing it, I don't know if it was with our hands in general or primarily our right hand or something like that, all of a sudden it is pulling primarily from the masculine energy. Whereas when we're dreaming, when we're sharing stories, it's a feminine energy, or it's in the more creative part of the brain. And so it's just sort of interesting to me how we humans think that we're continuously innovating, but we're actually just concretizing things into these limited frameworks that we can handle at the time. It reminds me of how when you dream, when you're in a dream and you wake up and you're like, that was crazy, and you try to give words to the dream, you start to say, I actually don't even know what to say about that. It was all so real and it felt normal, but I can't explain it. Was this a house or a boat? Why did I walk to the back and then I fell in the ocean? What is this? Mm-hmm. And so the moment you bring words to it, it takes away what made you feel about it in the first place. And now my husband's sitting there like, oh, cool dream, babe. You walked from a house to a boat. And I'm like, but no, you don't understand. My entire being changed through this. You just need to see it the way I saw it. And we're constantly trying to push that on people. But then we dim it down, or we pull in the energy that it could carry being the dream.
Yeah. I mean, this is the perpetual struggle of someone who works with words and knows both their power and their limitation, simultaneously. There is incredible power in words and language and symbols, and there are some things that cannot be captured in that way, right? And I'll still struggle. I'll still try. I'll still do my damnedest. to wrap language around the thing that wants to be communicated. But I know that some concepts, sensations, feelings, ideas, like there is insufficient language for. But that thing that wants to be communicated, I use that language because I think, I did an episode about this on my podcast once, but these ideas are like visitors, like knocking on our doors, right? And I think we're not the only door that they're knocking on. They're like knocking on a bunch of doors at the same time. But it's like when there is something that wants to come through you, that like wants to be said, expressed, made manifest in some way, uh, you know, when and if you have the time and the space, the energy, like the wherewithal in that moment to do it, like you try uh, to whatever degree you can in that moment. But I live in the paradox. I can see the paradox, and you play with it. Like you just do the best that you can.
It reminds me of a story that recently came up around Michael Jackson. Multiple people have shared a story that it was like 3 a.m. and he called in his entire team and said, "Quick, I have an idea. Meet me down in the studio right now. Otherwise, God's going to give it to Prince." And
I think I heard that.
yeah. And he was supposedly dead serious.
Yeah.
And so it's not as though it knocks on everybody's door, but I do believe it knocks on the door of the people that are the energetic match for it, that have a capacity to bring it through. And then after that, it's like, who's actually going to meet it with action? Who's going to bring it into the real world? And that's what I love about what you do, because I feel as though you expand the limitations of the words. You'll find one that people haven't thought of in a while, or combine them in such a way that gives it a slightly different meaning. But at the same time, one thing that I've picked up over the years is allowing life to move through me more. And I've picked this up from a number of spiritual practices, from little things people have said, but it just kept being a message. And one example that I've given a bunch of times is my relationship to labels. Every label I've carried at one point has helped me in some way, but if I stay with it too long, then it keeps me there versus like, okay, well, ADHD, what are some resources? Do I identify with it? No, I don't want to identify with these anymore, or at least not. I want to expand my ability to notice when it's no longer expansive. And so that even happens with words people are using. If you think about the words in our political climate, for example, a new word will come out and it's like it gives people permission to lean into something. But then that word starts to get so heavy as different people adopt it and minimize it down to their political agenda or whatever it is, that almost all of those words that people use just become really icky to me. I remember it was the first year I had this podcast. I tweeted something. I'm like, how did woke become negative? Imagine you thinking that's negative. And now, sorry for you out there that identify with the wokeness, I no longer do. I'm like, stop, just stop. It's too far this time. like we can spread love without this, whatever it is, whatever little thing that is. And so it's like knowing when to be in it and when to move through it.
Yeah.
What do you think the difference between naming and describing something is?
So a lot of times things are presented visually to me before I find language for them. And so the image that just came to my mind as you asked me that was a chair.
Nice.
And I was like, okay, the difference between naming a chair, right, and having language for I say chair, you picture chair. You could picture, like, between all of your listeners and ourselves, we are picturing like thousands and thousands and thousands of different chairs. But we know the category. It's giving us like something to anchor into, to have some shared understanding. The description is like a thing is sitting, right? And I mean, I think at a practical level, the name is almost categorical, like it's that identification kind of thing, because it helps you identify, oh, I'm speaking of this instead of that, right? I'm not talking about a ladder. I'm not talking about a bucket. I'm talking about a chair, right? The description, I think, allows for your own layer of additional meaning or nuance, color, characterization, any of those things. It's more expansive. And I think if I'm reflecting on what you're saying, but again, I'm just thinking about all this for the very first time. So it's not particularly thought out, but like if I'm reflecting on what you're saying around not wanting to identify with the label of something, like borrow what you can, what's useful in order to have a shared understanding of, like you say ADHD, like we all kind of plug in like, okay, I get kind of the categorical nature of what you're talking about. And then you use the description that you add to this to give the nuance, color, meaning, flavor, whatever that is, that you want us to, of all the different ways we could perceive ADHD, that we sort of hone in on the territory of what you're talking about. I think that's the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me because, again, it reminds me of what we talked about earlier, where you're then stepping back to see a bigger picture of what it is. It's like, does this have to be a chair? Like, what if it was something completely different? My kids actually have a book called This Is Not a Stick. Have you ever read this children's book? It's so
No.
simple. It just starts with this little cartoon character holding a stick. And then each page is like, it's not a stick. It's a lightning sword. Like, it's not a stick. It's a fishing pole. It's not a stick.
Mhm.
And so it is a reminder for children to step back and play and be more
Yeah.
creative with what they're seeing. We just saw Toy Story 5 in theaters. My kid's first movie theater experience. Is really cute. And that the whole concept is around like the battle of the tech invasion, tablets, all these kids having tablets and not remembering how to play, versus when these little girls that still have that ability start to play. It's like a whole world opens up. And
Mhm.
so in adulthood, it's funny the things that I've learned. I feel like I've learned way more uh, in the 5 years that I have been a mom, just learning how to relate to my children, to how to explain something to them in a way that they understand. And then I'm like, holy crap, that'll heal my inner child. Or wait, I've been doing this over here. Why can't I step back and see it doesn't just have to be a stick? How else do I describe it? It reminds me of a poetry lesson I did when I was in advanced English or college or something, where they're just like, you can only describe it without using any words that you've heard people previously describe it with.
Mhm.
And
It's almost like
it
a
was,
game of taboo, sort of.
it was so difficult though, because you start to realize how often you default to what you know, but you could almost feel your brain expanding from it.
Yeah.
Beyond just naming things, there's often also a framework behind it that people don't necessarily see that they have.
Yeah.
And so many people are in their careers, or they're trying to start a business, especially right now with the panic of people saying AI is going to take our jobs. My husband and I talk a lot about this because, yeah, if you're entry level, it probably is going to take your job. But at the moment, it's accelerating the people who know what they're doing if you know how to use it. And so, in that same way, though, the ability to stand out is so important. The ability to use new words around what you do. I'm just reminded of, I swear 90% of the podcast pitches I get say something about helping high achievers, leadership get unstuck. All of them, like everyone that hasn't worked with like a real professional. And I'm not talking about those podcast bookers that have, for some reason, they all have like a cartoon image of themselves in their signature. Those are the ones that I'm talking about. But it's like, okay, so step back from that. Like, everybody in the world can't be helping high
Yeah.
achievers with their leadership, getting unstuck in leadership, whatever it is.
Yeah.
How do you step back and see beyond just the description to perhaps the framework and then connect those two together?
Yeah, well, I think an easy one to kind of borrow in this space for folks who haven't been pitching podcasts or anything, but the thing that we almost all of us have unconsciously borrowed without knowing it. Like if you've ever had to write a bio for yourself, right? It's, I think, very rare somebody was ever taught, like, how do you do this? We just looked at what other people were doing, right? And kind of looked over their shoulder, copy what they did, put our own name in, our own school, our own work experience, credentials, awards, whatever. And we just kind of like played Mad Libs. But we were kind of absent on the day where the assignment was handed out. We never learned what the purpose really was. And we've just been borrowing this framework and copying work without really understanding. And I think when you zoom back and you say, like, okay, what is the assignment for something like a bio? It's really to create curiosity and inspire somebody to want some kind of connection with you, right? Like that's it. So sure, you can use convention and have credibility and all the sort of things, like do that, but also you've got more room to play than you think you do. And it's distancing yourself enough from the pattern of what you're doing, the pattern that you're repeating unconsciously, creating that distance to see that, oh, I am inhabiting this pattern of behavior, this pattern of approach to this idea, and sort of testing the edges a little bit, like asking, like, what is the question inherent in this, uh, this output, this deliverable, this document, this thing, this, what is the function of it inherently? And you sort of find your way to that question, and it's just a simple question, and then answer it for the first time with like fresh language and play that taboo game you're talking about, right? Like, can you answer this question without borrowing from convention, without using the same language everybody else is using? And you might find that you're invigorated by that. Like it frees you from that convention. It might give you this charge of energy to be like, oh, I actually want to talk about like the fact that I'm like a world champion jump roper. It may seem unrelated to my marketing strategist role, but like there's something there about who I am that is coming to life through that makes people more curious about who you are than the fact that you've just said you're an established marketing strategist with 20 years experience working in the technology field, right? For XYZ big company. I'm way more curious about like, what does it mean? Like, what kind of jump roping have you done? And then like, in Antarctica, why? Okay, like now I actually want to talk to you. They're like, we are curious creatures, but we tend to try to make ourselves, I don't know, we sort of drain the curiosity out of these things because we follow convention, and convention requires, established pattern, and familiar pattern. Uh, they don't want us to deviate from things because it just makes it more difficult to consume. But I think that people have brains, and some of us like to use them. And, we like to make creative leaps or curiosity leaps in pursuit of understanding. Um, Even if it's, ultimately to be like, I don't think that the jump roping is really going to help you in this job, but, maybe we're best friends now.
When I was in my 20s, before my big story occurred in my life, but I remember putting on a cover letter to a job that, and just including the fact that I have been down a laundry chute twice because I am willing to go where no man usually goes. I got the job. I was supposed to have a bachelor's degree at that point. I was still in college. I got the job. And so I just wanted to figure out a way to stand out when I showed up and there were 17 people there to hand in their resumes. So I was like redoing stuff. But, Yeah, I think we also limit our experience of ourselves when we keep with the familiarity of all of these, again, labels or descriptions that we use to describe what we've really done. One of the beautiful things I think about being in a marriage with, for me, of somebody that's on a similar path is there's been so many times where I have like written something or I have showed doubt, and then my husband comes back and he's like, what do you mean? When I met you, you were working for a startup, helped them get this many millions in sales per month. You did that, like, and would name all this stuff that I've just forgotten because for
Yeah.
some reason, what I'm feeling in this moment, I'm not
Mhm.
identifying with. But I think people also forget the inverse of that as well. It's something that I'm reminded of when I used to share about coming out of depressive periods. One thing I understood was that when I'm in that state, the ideas that I'm going to have are going to keep the status quo. Like they're
Mm.
all meant to keep me in that current feeling state. And so one of the things I used to do is I would write what I called my power list. And so I had a list of things that got me out of the funk. And in the time, in those moments, it sounded terrible going for a run or even going outside sometimes.
Yeah.
But I had to trust the version of myself that wrote them down then. And
Yeah.
so when we're that, I think that also can apply to what we're speaking about now, where it's like, okay, the words that might come to me might be keeping me in the status quo. How can I shift my energy first and then come up with the words and then see what those words do to me and kind of do this push and pull with
Mhm.
things? One word that I've been using a lot more in my life, in a way that I feel like has sort of, it's like people don't use this word in this way anymore. The word sensational. It's like, oh, that was sensational. People think just great, right? It's another word for great. Oh, that was awesome. That was sensational. That was amazing. But what does it actually mean? We've been talking about sensations. It was sensational. It made me feel. And
Mhm.
so I realized years ago that those are the experiences that I love, whether it's like a floating sound bath where there's music and there's, I'm
Mhm.
in water and maybe I have a piece of chocolate in my mouth just to top it off. Like, how do I tickle every single sense with what I'm doing or saying? And that has helped guide me more as well, because I'm not just feeding one little addictive part of myself or whatever it is. It's like, no, how can I make this a whole body experience? And you can do that with, how do I make my work a whole body experience for somebody? How do I make them feel something when they hear what I do versus just, I almost said scanning through the yellow pages. Do they even have those anymore? But you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, even like describing someone as a sensation, right? Like they have a visceral, palpable way of conveying energy that like hits you. Uh, and that's, I mean, I think it's very clear when you're in the presence, especially musicians and singers, when they sing in a way that gives you goosebumps and you have that lived experience of being like, oh my God, I am on this planet in this moment in the presence of somebody who is channeling that energy through their body. It's traveling through the air in waves that are hitting me. They are a sensation. This is sensational. And there's a resonance there to the literal frequency of what is coming out of their body and the way that I am experiencing it. All of these things, they're like physical phenomena that are also conceptual phenomena, relational phenomena. There's no layers of all these different dimensions of it that are all playing at the same time. And what we experience is like, man, that felt good. Or holy shit, that just like blew my mind. Because it's easier for us to like attach to, but there are all kinds of things going on under the surface at the same time.
Well, I love leaving listeners with something to practice or think about for the week to just kind of bring this in. What would you leave them with?
I would leave them with a couple questions if they're looking for identifying the charge that they're holding in themselves that hasn't hit oxygen yet. And, the question would be like, where is the energy inside you this thing that keeps returning, the thing that's creating tension, the thing that's refusing to disappear, and what feels alive, right? Circle that, and that'll start to collect that energy into its own kind of little cumulus cloud that you can play with and you can squeeze and you can like inhabit and see what wants to find its path out of the cloud and into the ground and create some kind of lightning strike in your own life. But play with those questions. They will take you to interesting places.
Well, for listeners who are as intrigued with Anita as I've always been, first, you need to know this woman literally wrote Apple's credo years ago. And since then, she has worked with some of the top performers in the world, helping them give language to what they do, has helped co-written and written multiple TED Talks for people. She's just, whenever I want an exceptional interview, I know I can just call on her and she can come on the show and blow your minds. So for listeners that are interested in working with you or learning more about what you do, where's the best place for them to connect?
You could check out my website, causeeffectcreative.com, effect with an E. And there are various ways to connect with me. And yeah, I'm reachable.
Want to work through this week's Mind Love Challenge with others? The Mind Love Collective is a free community with monthly themed calls, weekly challenge accountability, and real support throughout the year. So join us at mindlove.com/join. Thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.